All right, let's dive right in. We are about to go on a pretty wild journey into one of the biggest mysteries out there, human consciousness. And we're going to explore it through some of the most profound and, yeah, most controversial substances and experiences known to humankind. So, at the very heart of all this is one simple but massive question. For as long as we've been around, people have been looking for answers, in prayer, in deep meditation, in these huge, life-changing moments that feel like they connect us to something bigger. But what if those experiences aren't just random? What if they're a central part of our story? Okay, here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this whole mystery by looking at it through 4 totally different and honestly mind-bending lenses. We've got an evolutionary theory, a psychological map, a deep dive into our biology, and even a theological warning. So first up, we're going way, way back. I mean, to the dawn of humanity itself. And we're going to ask a really provocative question. What if a simple mushroom is the reason you and I are here today thinking these thoughts? This idea suggests that our connection with psychoactive plants isn't some new age thing. No, it's an ancient, deep relationship that might be fundamental to who we are. I mean, look at this ancient rock art. It's almost 9,000 years old. Some people look at this and they don't just see figures. They see shamans holding mushrooms, maybe even trying to tell us something vital about our own past. And that brings us to this really controversial idea called the stoned ape theory. The gist is that these hallucinogens were the real missing link that caused our brains to triple in size so quickly, something that has honestly stumped scientists for a long time. Now, it's a great story, but let's be clear, mainstream science is pretty skeptical, mostly because there's no direct fossil evidence to back it up. So, according to the theory, it all happened in 3 stages. First, in small doses, these mushrooms actually made our ancestors better hunters by sharpening their vision. Then, in larger, more communal doses, they helped dissolve egos, which led to tighter community bonds and, well, more reproduction. And finally, the highest doses might have lit up the language centers of the brain, basically kickstarting our ability to think in symbols and create culture. Okay, let's shift gears now. For our second lens, we're moving away from our deep evolutionary history and into our own minds, right here in the present. This viewpoint sees the psychedelic experience not as some historical accident, but as a territory, an inner landscape that can actually be mapped out and explored. Back in the 60s, guys like Timothy Leary had this kind of aha moment. They saw this incredible parallel between a psychedelic journey and the soul's journey after death as described in ancient texts like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. They thought, hey, maybe these ancient maps could be a guide for modern-day explorers of consciousness. So they broke the whole trip down into 3 distinct phases, or Bardos. The first is this state of total ego loss, just pure, timeless awareness. That's followed by the second phase, which is full of intense, vivid hallucinations and visions. And finally, there's the third Bardo, which is the journey back, the struggle to put your ego back together and return to the reality we all share. All right, from ancient maps, we're jumping straight into the modern laboratory for our third lens. And this one poses a truly startling question. What if the key to these reality-bending experiences isn't something you find outside yourself, but a chemical that's already being made inside your own brain? Meet DMT. It's one of the most powerful psychedelics on the planet. And guess what? Our bodies make it. The researcher Dr. Rick Strassman gave it the nickname the spirit molecule. He theorized that it might be made in the pineal gland, this tiny little gland in the center of our brain that mystics have called the third eye for centuries. Strassman's research led him to this incredible hypothesis. What if our brains release a flood of this stuff at the most critical moments of our lives? At birth, at death, during near-death experiences, or in states of deep mystical meditation. These moments could actually be biological gateways to another state of consciousness, powered by our own internal chemistry. This just begs a huge question, one that Strassman himself asks. If our bodies have this built-in factory for one of the most powerful psychedelic compounds known, why? What's the point? Is it just some evolutionary accident, or is there a much deeper purpose to it? But, not everyone sees this as some amazing evolutionary leap or spiritual key. Our final lens takes a hard right turn, offering a completely different take, viewing this entire phenomenon as a dangerous spiritual deception with really deep roots in history. From this point of view, when you look back at the chaos of the 1960s, you don't just see a social revolution, you see a spiritual one. Theologians like Gary North argue that the rise of psychedelics helped trigger a massive revival of occultism and paganism, all because traditional Western authority and reason were starting to break down. So what this really boils down to is a clash between two totally different ways of seeing the world. On one side, you have the idea that history is a straight line, guided by a single God. On the other, you have this idea that history is a cycle, and that individuals can achieve their own kind of salvation through secret, mystical knowledge. This viewpoint sees the whole psychedelic movement as a fast track to that second worldview.
So, from this perspective, the modern fascination with altered states isn't some new frontier at all. No, it's seen as a very, very old spiritual war against the core values of Christian civilization. It's a modern reboot of ancient pagan beliefs.
So, where does all this leave us? Well, we're standing at this incredible crossroads, where four completely different and often contradictory explanations for the same powerful human experience all crash into each other. Let's just boil it all down. What is this experience? Is it an evolutionary tool, a mushroom that literally made us human? Is it an inner map, a journey we can all take within our own minds? Is it a biological engine, just a chemical firing in our brains? Or is it a theological warning, a spiritual trap that threatens civilization itself? Each one of these paths leads to a radically different place.
And in the end, the lens you choose to look through might actually say more about your own beliefs than it does about the experience itself. Which leads to one final lingering question. When we try to solve the mystery of consciousness, are we actually looking out at the universe, or are we just looking into a mirror?